All right, thank you. So, welcome everybody. This is a hearing on Bill number 19-0431 about towing and regulations. Like in our previous hearings and work groups, we're going to have a pretty simple process. I'm going to start off and give the bill sponsor the opportunity to speak. And I believe there's some new amendments, allow him the opportunity to present it as we did in previous hearings. And then at that point, we may vote on those amendments. If not, we will go straight into the city agencies and any other reps from the city you want to present, followed by a testimony from anybody who's logged in. When it comes time for testimony, what I will be doing is going person by person, unmuting you and asking if you'd like to speak. I see there's a lot of folks that called in, and so I will go and give each one of you the opportunity to speak. I only see the first 6 numbers of your phone number, so I'll have to refer to you by what call-in number you are, but you will hear a beeping. So when we get to that point, just make sure you're in a quiet place where you'll be able to hear the beep, and then we'll give you the opportunity to testify if you so wish. If you would not like to testify, then just let us know, and we'll move on to the next person. Without further ado, I will turn the floor over to the bill sponsor, Councilman Dorsey. Councilman Dorsey.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you. There is a set of amendments that I sent out earlier today to the committee, to the mayor's office, to the council president's office. And there's an explanation in the email that I sent of this set of 10 amendments. Numbers 2 through 5 and 9 have already been adopted by the committee exactly as they are drafted. That's numbers 2 through 5 and number 9. Numbers 6 and 8 have been adopted by the committee in a previous version, I guess. So my hope here is that the 6 and 8 as adopted before would be retracted and be replaced with these 6 and 8. Those are represents changes made pursuant to conversations with towers and council members. Amendments 1, 7, and 10 have not been adopted by the committee. And just a few seconds ago, I sent one further amendment to address the significant concern raised by the chair about section 22-30. And this is my proposal to strike that provision from the bill and in its entirety, and request a study and report to be done pertaining to this concern over the dispatch technology. I could go into further details about these amendments as anybody may need, if you so desire.
Yes, the ones that haven't been adopted, you can just go one by one and just explain it.
Sure. Number 1 was the amendment that previously would have assigned staffing duties for the tow board to the Department of Finance. At the time of the previous hearing, that was being worked out, and we had not had this alternate version yet drafted. This, as we have landed on now, and as you have now, would assign staffing duties for the tow board instead to the transportation department. That resolved significant concerns from the finance department, and I believe that the Department of Transportation is good with this. Amendment 7 is one that addresses the chair's concern about predatory towing and with the final change made to this in Amendment 7, changing the hours of restriction to allow patrol towing between the hours of 7 p.m. and 7 a.m. This is something that the Council President's office has now expressed support for. Amendment 10, again, addresses the concern of the chair to make it clear to people who have been towed that they have some means of bringing any concern or grievance to the tow board by requiring that receipts include the tow board's phone number and email address. And so those are from the ones that I sent out earlier, that package of 10, those are the 3 that had not yet been adopted. Numbers 6 and 8, as I noted, are different than how they were drafted when the committee adopted them. In number 6, there are some changes here in the language around incomplete tows. This came as a direct result of a conversation with Paula Protani at Frankfurt Towing, in which she, like others, raised concerns about the previous language about vehicle being lifted 6 inches or more off the ground. And what this says as an alternative is that 2 wheels would have to be off the ground in order to be considered a tow, where you can where the tower could charge a drop fee. And in number 8, we have a provision for a longer implementation. Now, with this one, I would note that that longer implementation was in here only to allow greater time for the implementation of the dispatch technology that, at the chair's request, I have now struck from the bill. And so it's not clear to me that this is necessary at this point, or that at least the 60th day substituted with 180th day is now unnecessary. And then, as I just emailed the committee, there is an 11th amendment that provides uncodified text to require that a report be provided back to the city council from BCIT on cost and feasibility of real-time vehicle location dispatch. And so that is in your inboxes, committee members. Can I answer any questions about these or anything?
Do we have any committee members with any questions for the bill sponsor? If you do, you can just unmute yourself and start asking your question. Members with any questions? All right, I'll ask a couple questions. I'm trying to read through the stuff that you sent, including this amendment number 11, which you sent 9 minutes after the start time of the hearing. But let's first go to the ones that you sent this afternoon. You know, with the concern on that number 7 is poised to address to some degree. I see you added about reasonable, making reasonable attempt to contact the property owners, or what exactly is reasonable, and how do you prove that you made a reasonable attempt instead of just saying that you made a reasonable attempt to tow or towing?
Mr. Chair, this amendment is written by me entirely to appease your concern. So if that language is not suitable to you, I would defer back to you on that.
Well, I'm asking what you considered reasonable. You wrote this, you didn't show this to me up until this afternoon. So I'm asking what you determined to be reasonable by adding that into the amendment.
I sent you that amendment a week ago.
I just saw the one that you sent this afternoon. And you indicated just this afternoon at, what was it, 2 o'clock, or that you made 12 o'clock that you made changes to it. And so I'm looking at that and I'm seeing that you added that paragraph. So I'm just asking what you mean, how you interpret a reasonable attempt.
I would defer to the tow board of the future to determine what was reasonable on receiving any complaint.
Okay. I mean, it doesn't say that the tow board's going to be the decider on that, but I'll write that down. That doesn't make sense. But
I mean, if a person thinks that they've been towed and that and that a reasonable attempt was not made, they have the right to make a complaint about it to the tow board, and they can ask for a hearing, they can ask for consideration, whatever. And if at that point it is determined that a reasonable attempt was not made, I guess the tow board can say so to the tower. I don't know how else anybody interprets reasonable except for reasonably.
right, so that's why we wouldn't leave it ambiguous like that, because then it opens up that discussion at every point. But I'll move on to the new amendment that you just sent. I'm trying to read through it as you were talking because it just came in. And the one glaring thing I noticed, if you can just explain why that is, you talk about this 30, it requires within 30 days for this group of folks to come together and submit a report to the council. So I do have a couple logistical questions about that. But before I do that, you also, in your previous amendment, I think it was amendment number 1, state that DOT is the one that's going to be taking over these efforts, and so we'll get the DOT on that in a moment. But I'm just curious as to why DOT would not be included in amendment number 11 if they are now the key players as per amendment number 1.
Because the assessment of the technological needs rests entirely with BCIT.
No, BCIT is the implementation. They implement what the agencies tell them they need. And so it says
No, the fire department, the police department, and BCIT have worked together on this and have all decided that BCIT is the agency to which all matters related to this concern will be deferred to.
right,
They have already committed to being the agency to be the determinant of this.
right, and I agree that is a good move. I have a lot of faith in BCIT, and so I do think that is a good move. Again, I would just ask that if DOT is the agency that's going to be overseeing this implementation and how this works on a day-to-day, shouldn't they be the most important player to be at the table to determine what the technology needs are going to be? They are the agency that handles towing today. So wouldn't they be the first ones to know what is necessary? Certainly the fire department.
It's fine. Hey, look, it's fine with me. If you want to include DOT as an agency that can be in consultation with BCIT, great.
I'm just asking if there was an intentional reason why the key agency involved.
No, it's just that at no point has DOT involved itself in this discussion at all. It has at every point been a discussion that until today was being led by BPD in consultation with BCIT and BCFD. It was only brought to my attention today that no longer was BPD going to be the lead on this, that BCIT was going to be the lead on this. and because BCIT, the fire department, and the police department are the three in the 911 call center where dispatch happens from, they are the only ones who have ever been part of this conversation explicitly about the development and utilization of the technology.
Right, but
DOT's part in towing is essentially limited to allowing vehicles to come in and out of Pulaski Highway.
right, but the bill, as per amendment number 1, and as was discussed at the previous hearing, sets this responsibility that initially had thought to be in BPD or the fire department to then transferred over to DOT. So I was just trying.
No, amendment doesn't do that. Amendment number 1 has to do only with the administration and staffing of the tow board.
Okay. If this bill has to be implemented, right? And DOT
again, if you think that DOT should be a party in consultation there, I'm fine with that. I have no problem with that.
Yeah, I would say DOT is the key.
That's great. I support it.
Okay. All right, so that will have to be edited. Okay, if we can move on to, let's start with the agencies. If we can start with the Department of Transportation. Liam,
good afternoon, Mr. Chair, Councilman, everyone else. Thanks for having us. So DOT did have an internal discussion last week to go over some of these amendments and to discuss the amendment that would kind of put this consolidated board under DOT. And, in talking with the finance department right now, it doesn't sound like any additional resources would be allocated to the agency in the outset. But that's something that could be subject to change based on our, assessment in terms of our capacity to do it within the towing division's current, funding and resource allocation. But we stand by our previous bill report, which is no objection. We're willing to work with the city council to manage this consolidated board. I will say, I feel like we've had open arms this entire legislative process, so we want to continue to do so. And if there are any amendments or changes or things that we need to do at DOT, we would love to know that and be a team player. Thank you.
Does anybody have any questions for DOT? So if you guys end up, Liam, if you guys end up being the agency on the board, number 1, are you interested in being a part of the discussion about the technology needs, being that you guys currently do towing for the city and oversee all that?
I think that that's a good idea. Yes.
Yeah. I thought so. And then the other thing is, are you guys, if it ends up going down the route where, per se, 911 will not be managing this, is DOT prepared to manage this?
So that's a part of the, what we're going to have to really have that internal evaluation. And, we've talked with the finance department. They're willing to, at least listen to our concerns if we feel like there's some, a lack of resources within the towing division. So again, I think we're willing to be a team player, but we have a little bit more to learn and discuss.
Gotcha. So do you guys have 24/7 operations that could step in if need be?
I'm not sure if Tina or Michael is on from our towing division. Michael Brady. I'm not sure if they're listed in the. Are they listed in the panelists? There might be a Michael Brady or.
Yeah, I'll elevate him. And who else?
Okay. Tina Wilson is our acting towing division chief. Michael's with the towing division. Michael, did you hear that question?
Can you repeat the question? Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay. I'm sorry. Can you repeat the question?
Yeah, so the question was, if DOT ends up overseeing the operations of this, if for some reason 911 cannot, does DOT have the capacity to implement this in their 24/7 operations? And what that would mean is, as a fallback plan, if at any time 24/7, 365, if there's a need for a tow, that somebody at DOT would be able to call around and find a tow truck to make that tow.
As far as I know, we do tow 24/7. Tina would be able to speak better on the details of towing. I don't really handle the dispatch or know much about the dispatch, but I do know that we do tow 24/7. Although the later hours of the evenings, I don't know if the staffing is the same as during the day. So that would be a question for Tina, but I can say that I do know that we do take in cars 24/7.
Gotcha. And so you guys have the capacity?
I think we'd be
The
interested in learning a bit more as to if this would increase the amount of calls we get at night or not. But it sounds like just preliminarily, we do have 24/7 operations of the tow yards.
All right. So certainly, got it.
As far as the capacity, I know that was a challenge even when Mr. Baker was the chief. There are times where it gets pretty crowded down there, and especially even during this pandemic, we're still not operating at full capacity. So we're taking in more cars than we're releasing. So it gets crowded in there, and I'm the claims investigator. So the more crowded the yard gets, the more damaged vehicle claims I receive, and in turn, the more money the city spends on paying out for vehicles that are damaged while in our custody. So yes, capacity is a concern.
Okay. Is your while we have you here, is the tow truck full right now?
I believe it is. Yes, it's full. Yes.
We're approaching capacity, and Councilman, we can talk offline, and I can follow up with our administration to see if we can think of anything creative.
Yeah. I mean, we probably need more parking spots to fill more spaces.
Yeah.
All right. Does anybody have any other questions for DOT before we move on to the next agency?
I do, Councilman. Are the cars that are in there, are these cars towed due to an accident during this time? Like, will it be similar to, I know once the city is opened up and we tow cars for just being abandoned on the street, I'm just trying to get the scope of what it will be like, what the expansion will be.
Well, we're so I don't even think we're taking accident vehicles at this time. Right now, accident vehicles are still going to the private tow companies' yards. Right now, what's in the lot is unpaid tickets. I'm trying to think what else is in there. Abandons. Now, some accidents are in there. If the accident is involved in a crime and the police put it on hold, then it does go there. Any vehicle involved in a crime will go to the city yard. So if someone's pulled over for a traffic stop and they're arrested, then the vehicle will come here. But if it's an accident between two parties, it goes to the private tow company's lot for now. They used to come to our yard, but once the pandemic hit and we were shut down for a while and we weren't able to release cars, it got kind of full. So they've been operating as taking the vehicles to their lots.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
On that note, Mr. Brady, right now, what are you guys doing with abandoned cars?
So, and I want to jump in for Michael here. Abandoned vehicles, any towing that's actually occurring right now, it needs to be. We will tow it if it is called in by Baltimore City Police as a potential hazard, and that's because we have less capacity at the tow yards, and it's harder to. The problem is it's harder to complete the vehicle retrieval process due to the executive order that forbid in-person transactions, which is it's really hard to not do an in-person transaction when you're transferring a vehicle out of a facility. We do have a kind of a workaround using a service through the parking authority to kind of do it remotely, but it still does require people to be on site.
Gotcha. So capacity is already an issue. I got it. All right. Let's move on to the police department. Ed, you want to speak, or Michelle?
Hi, Mr. Chair. We definitely stand by our report, and I just want to point out a couple things from our bill report very quickly. Although it sounds like Councilman Dorsey's amendment number 11 deals with our biggest concern, which was that BCIT take the lead on purchasing and implementing the technology as an enterprise solution, and that we needed to do a thorough requirements gathering process in order to make sure that whatever we get is going to meet everyone's needs. And that's all that I have to add at this point.
Mr. Davis, do you have anything to add?
Just that that we do concur with BSIC taking the lead. I think at this point is what I heard in determining the overall cost, future cost for a system, a highly complex, potentially highly complex system.
So, I mean, so I guess a question I have for you directly.
Yes, sir.
So throughout this process, I guess from the beginning, I've asked the same question. A, how's it going to happen? Understanding the needs of what this technology is required to have. And B, how much does it cost to then figure out what that looks like? That's been going on for more than 30 days. I see this amendment that I'm still combing through gives 30 days from now. So in the past 30 days, have you gotten any information indicating ballpark costs involved and timeline and how something like this could get built?
No, sir. We have not been able to do that in the 30 days. What we quickly identified is that there is, we believe, a lot of complexity in deploying a system that has both input and output, a lot of touch points. And we look for, commercial off-the-shelf systems. We did some research looking to see what's out there in terms of industry. And again, and not knowing really what's all truly required for a mature, complex towing application, we were able to basically ascertain that it's a lot more complex, and our efforts to really give you even a ballpark figure would have just been, I think, inaccurate. And so we had subsequent meetings, and I think part of those meetings and discussions resulted in, BSIT, concurring with us that it does require a lot more research and a lot more in-depth analysis to really determine if it can be done.
Right. And so I believe it was your bill report, correct me if I'm mistaken, if it was a different agency or not, but in the bill report, you had asked for a work study to work through these issues prior. Is that correct?
We did. Yes,
Okay.
we did ask for that.
Gotcha. Thank you. Does anybody have any questions for BPD before we move on to the next agency? Feel free to just speak up. Nope. Okay. Let's move on to law. Ashley, do you have anything to add?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We don't have anything to add, but I did want to point out that there's a typo in amendment number 4, which I believe was already adopted. In section 3 of amendment 4, the second line charges missing an R, and it's just easier to fix now rather than later. And that's all. We stand by our report.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Let's see, we got fire department. Do we have anybody from the fire department here? Anybody from 911 or CAD here that currently deals with towing dispatch? No. Okay. All right. And I assume finance, we'll just get you out of the way. You have anything to add?
Hi, Mr. Chair. No, we do not have anything to add. Thank you.
You guys are the winners of the day, being able to pass it on to DOT. All right. So finance, I guess we will move on to, actually, do we have anybody, we have somebody from the mayor's office here? The mayor's office want to weigh in? Nina or Matt, would you like to weigh in? Nope.
Hi, Mr. Chair. I'm not sure if Matt dropped off, but we don't have anything to add in addition to what's already been discussed.
Okay, thank you. All right, moment we've all been waiting for, BCIT.
Wow, that's going to be a tough act to follow with everyone waiting. Well, just in listening to previous testimony, Mr. Chair, BCIT is prepared to build the estimate, build the options, and select what's the best solution moving forward. And I didn't jump into the earlier conversation between you and Councilman Dorsey, but we do intend to have all the stakeholders involved in this effort as we look at not only determine what those requirements truly are, what the options are for whether it's a package solution that can do it holistically, whether it's a package solution that could do it in part that we would have to integrate, whether it's one of our existing systems that can do this. What we want to do is make sure we make the right choice based upon the requirements that we collect, and from there we will make a recommendation in terms of what the costs are, what the schedule would be, and what the requirements to implement it would be as well. And so we concur with BPD and fire in terms of our role in pulling all of this together and coordinating the efforts across all of those different agencies.
Gotcha. And so certainly that is a good place for it to be. Just some questions along the line. Are you guys familiar right now on some of what the requirements and what the platform capabilities would need to be?
We have what was drafted within the actual bill. We also have some statements from our CAD person who understands those requirements as well, and has briefed us as to what the possibilities are, what the capabilities are. Do we have detailed requirements? We do not have detailed requirements. And I think that's really the key here, is understanding the details of what we're trying to do and fleshing those out.
So would it be fair, based on your knowledge of reading the bill, that this is sort of like an Uber or Lyft technology based for towing companies, where the capabilities have to be, obviously the baseline is that it can keep track of where the vehicles are, and secondary, knowing when they are available versus not available, and those, so that two-way communication structure Would you say it operates similar to those platforms?
I think you can say that on the surface, maybe yes, but I think once you get under the covers a little bit, no, especially in terms of how you store data, how you integrate data, how you report data. But as an analogy, I think you could say yes.
Right. And so in a technology like that, certainly it's no easy feat to reverse engineer an Uber or a Lyft. If it was very easy, we'd probably have, 1,000 different similar companies, not just the two big ones. And so, as far as the city's IT capabilities are concerned, is this a project that you think our internal software engineers could develop, or do you anticipate needing some outside help on a project like this?
So first of all, I would say that the technology that Uber and Lyft have been using has been out there for quite some time. It's just that they had the right vision and capabilities to pull it all together and turn it into a nice business model. In terms of if we had a spec, what I'd say here, IT team go ahead and develop it. I would say no, we're not built that way to build this type of software with this type of expertise. However, I suspect that there are plenty of contractors and consultants that are out there. I think there are also probably different platforms that we could leverage or tweak that could potentially do this job without us having to start from ground zero. But again, that also is dependent upon the requirements. The key is, what are those requirements?
Right, and I agree wholeheartedly with what you're saying. That makes perfect sense. And so, being that we would have to bring in folks from the outside on similar style programs, putting aside the hardware component, obviously this does require a degree of a hardware component. Some of those technologies have been around for many, many, many years. And so, just on the software side, putting the hardware aside for a second, what kind of level project would you say building something like this would be? What kind of ballpark figures would you say it would cost if we needed to build this, if we needed to customize this to fit the legislation and not be able to just go based off of what's available out there? So if you want me to elaborate slightly on that. So in the fire department or DPW or the pizza delivery cars, they all have relatively basic tracking devices that uses an existing tracking software. Those we know the cost. You can buy them over the counter at any technology store. You can buy them online as well. We know those trackers can range in cost. It can be $500, $1,000 a piece, and then there's a monthly component to that. Obviously, like to provide that signal. So essentially, in layman terms, the tracker needs to have the ability, like a cell phone, to be able to give the internet over and give a signal to indicate where that vehicle may be. That technology is already out there. We know what those costs ballpark would be based on you can go and buy them. But then building an umbrella platform, which would then have the ability to interface with, let's say, 10, 20, 30 different towing companies all at once, and then being able to integrate that to CAD or to our 911 system so that information is available to them if a call comes out, there's a car accident, police officer, fire truck, EMT calls for a tow, they get out there, they have to identify who that tow is and make that call. And so right now, we know we have a simple process and how that works. It certainly can use improvement. So what do you envision as a ballpark figure on building such a software component out?
I think that's kind of hard for me to elaborate on now. And I can give you just one example as to why it would be hard. You mentioned that integrating with the various towing companies, however many there are, in those kind of scenarios, it would be there's an API or application programming interface that they would need to integrate with us. So there's a lot of different pieces to even what you said, are a lot of different detailed requirements that could drive the cost one way or the other. So it's kind of hard to certainly in this form pick a number out of the air and with any level of certainty or confidence. So I can get a high level estimate to you sooner versus later, but I'd really like to get a little bit more information before I did that.
Right. And so, I mean, certainly what we see is that this industry is not exactly cutting edge as it pertains to technology. And so having that level of integration, I do agree with you, will certainly drive the costs up tremendously, considering, they might not have the most basic technology wherewithal to be able to implement it, or to have the technology that, that simply could work. And so, I mean, this is something that I know you were just invited to the table, so this is by no means, directed at you specifically, but we've certainly been asking these same, relatively basic questions for a long time now, and certainly, from my experience with software, a program like this, if we had to build from the ground up, which frankly I had said at previous hearings, and thank you for confirming it, that the city does not have the capacity to build software code from the ground up to meet the requirements of this bill. I certainly agree we're going to need outside help and tap into outside existing technologies, and then try to work the integration and customization that will be necessary. But what I also know from being in the industry since I've been in college is that something like this could run very easily in the six figures, and if things really don't go in the right direction, it can even approach seven figures. Do you believe that that there's any chance that if you guys have to build this technology or these customizations, without finding an existing technology, could you build something like this for under six figures?
Under six figures, that's a lot of nines that can roll together. I mean, if you say 0 to 999, comma 999, I have really no idea. I would respectfully ask to get the opportunity to get the requirements and then comment on the cost range. I can do that quickly, but I think it's probably, these are the kind of things that I'll tell you from my experience, that IT guys get in front of boards and they pound their fist and, yeah, I can do it, and they walk away and find out that it's either more complex or maybe less complex, and then they've made a commitment. And I'm not trying to back away from our responsibility to pull this estimate together. I just don't want to set expectations incorrectly, certainly publicly.
Yeah, I mean, the two things I've never seen in the industry is on time and on budget. And certainly,
I have. I can tell you, I have. I get, you may not have, but I have, and I would tell you to look at the Workday implementation that's going to happen soon.
Okay. And so, within this technology, do you envision that this working through CAD and 911?
I think that's one of the options. I think that's what we have to look at. I mean, there certainly are some concerns about it working through or how it's going to work through, but those are some of the things that we have to figure out. Those are some of the things I think BPD has mentioned that there adds to the complexity. Because to what extent are you looking to use those public safety type of software and technologies for this type of work? And so I think those are some of the challenges that we would need to look at, but I also think those are the options, but it's hard to commit which ones, that this is the option over the other.
Right. And so if we can just cut in for a second, maybe ask that of not anyone from 911 or BPD, are you open to opening up your firewall and allowing a system which includes private tow companies to be able to implement this bill, or are you going to request that it be done externally.
Mr. Chair,
I got a question on the table for BPD. If you guys can answer that question, and then I'll come to you, Councilman Dorsey.
I think we need to work with BSIT to figure out the pros and cons of all of it. I don't think that we are prepared right now to say either way because we just don't know. We're certainly not going to leave our system open for attack. And if we sense that that's a possibility, then we definitely would have to go in another direction. Woody, is there anything, or Chief Davis, is there anything else you would add?
Oh, I just concurred that, as we gather requirements and we look at systems, part of this process may uncover some unique configuration requirements that makes us exposed. And we won't know that until we, get into some pretty deep planning. So, it is difficult and hard to say. I just concur. It is difficult and hard to say at this time, what would be some of the costs. Because we just don't know enough about potential systems that are available or could be built, not by us, but by someone that's qualified to provide that service.
And Mr. Davis, are you familiar with what the screen? Have you seen the screens with the current technology? How it shows the different emergency apparatus on the screen moving around based on the trackers? Have you seen that?
I've seen not here in the city, but I've seen that technology used in other places, yes.
Right. And so based on that, and obviously Baltimore City is unique based on the size of it. So anybody who's gone up to 911 dispatch, I've been up there many times. I strongly encourage people to schedule a tour after COVID and see how it operates. Knows that Baltimore City being a relatively small in size jurisdiction, a condensed jurisdiction, right? As opposed to, say, like a Baltimore County, even, which is spread out a little bit, it's spread out a lot more. With our density and with the amount of vehicles that are currently on the screen, do you say adding 100 plus additional vehicles to that screen could be a distraction to a current emergency apparatus that's on the screen? That could possibly take an additional seconds when they matter the most to sort through which moving thing is a fire truck versus which one's a tow truck. Did you say that it would be a distraction at all to that system?
I'm not sure that I can speak to whether it would be a distraction. I'll speak from my personal experience. The more information you layer on a GIS-enabled platform where people can see dots or symbols moving around on the screen, does add levels of complexity. But there are technologies that would, say, differentiate them by shape or color. Could it be a distraction if I was, I'm not a 911 operator, but if I was having to tend to a call, deal with 911, and then look on the screen and try to identify a difference between a tow truck, a fire vehicle, EMT, or a police vehicle, I would think that would be somewhat cumbersome and maybe a little difficult to deal with.
This is Jessica. I can speak to that as well.
And if you can just say who you are.
Captain Jessica Leach from Police Communications.
Okay. Go ahead.
I mean, although I oversee dispatchers, we're not 911 call takers, but I assume we're talking about the dispatching of the tows on our end. Yes, that would be a huge distraction. And right now, I believe we only see police vehicles, or maybe that's the only layer that we choose to see. But even still, that with hundreds of tows, I mean, it's really, really unreasonable, in my opinion, to ask a dispatcher to take the time to, differentiate between what's what. I mean, to be honest, they don't have the time.
Okay, thank you. Any committee members? I'm sorry, Councilman Dorsey, did you have something you wanted to add?
only that all of this is something that I think can be addressed in the study that's in the amendment that I've sent out to the committee. that, you know, I've proposed here to entirely strike any reference to this in the bill and defer entirely to a study and report on this.
Right. So, I mean, we've got to look through that thing. But what if if there are challenges? What metric will be used to decide if this moves forward, based on the work group, which mind you is in a committee report that BPD had submitted a while ago. But if that were
the amendment says that BCIT and these other agencies just need to study the cost and feasibility and do some comparative assessment and provide a report to the city council. Nothing here demands any further action beyond that. So
right,
the only metric that matters is, does the city council want to take this up at a later date, completely separate from this bill?
I mean, not necessarily. I mean, this, regarding the costs and process, that's something that has been asked for longer than 30 days, and certainly could be accomplished in a work study or could be accomplished in a work group, like was brought up in the past. But is there any committee members or any members of the council who have any questions for any agencies or for anybody who's here before we move to public testimony? Nope. Director Carter, did you have anything else? I'm sorry, we went off on a tangent. Did you have something else to add before we move on to public testimony?
No, I'm good. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. We will now move on to public testimony. I will be going line by line as I see it here in my attendee list. And if your name is on here, I will call you by your name. If your name is not, I will call you by what user number you are. Hopefully you see the same thing on your end. And also I can say the first 6 numbers of your phone number also to help you know that it's you. The first person on here is Thomas Showalter. I'm unmuting you now and you can give your testimony. Go ahead, Mr. Showalter.
How you doing, Councilman? Thank you very much for taking the time to speak with us today. We look very much forward to working with everyone to make this as seamless as possible. Some of my first concerns is the amendments. I think we all stand a little bit of a disadvantage because I never got none of the amendments at all to that. And the last time we had a work study, I never got the amendments until the very last second. So we're asked to defend or to help on some of these amendments. And again, we didn't get them. I sit here with 7, 8 other towers here to try to work through this process. Just like we asked for a work study, we wanted to be part of helping the city through these challenges. Again, so getting the amendments would have been nice way prior to us having this conversation. So it concerns me that a decision could possibly be made today, and we didn't have a chance to look through them, decide what is a good form of action. So I asked, again, if we move forward, could we possibly get better communication when it comes to amendments or concerns so we could work with them? My first, again, the hours of monitoring properties. My biggest concern would be if I'm an owner of a property in the city, I would like to be able to dictate who comes on my property, who gets towed 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. I don't want to go out and monitor properties. I don't want to have to think about any of that. That's why people that own properties, they hire other companies to come out, they patrol, they monitor 24/7 with what's going on in the world today. I don't want to be out there dictating. I don't want them to know that I own the property. I would rather hire a company, set rules. That's why already on the rules and regulations, we have a contract that the city approved. The property owner fills that out. They would like it monitored for XYZ, blocking the fire lanes, dumpsters, curbs, flat tires, no tags. It's itemized out. So I don't see the need to dictate to a property owner that pays taxes in the city about when you feel, the city meaning, at certain times. We're allow you to park illegally, but other times we don't. But the city allows people to park on the city streets when they don't pay their tickets or when they don't pay their parking meters. It gets towed. The city tows them vehicles. So what's the difference if I'm a property owner? I don't want them parking there. That's my first concern. As I go down, I sent the council my list of concerns about the bill with some possible answers to help them. And I would hopefully everybody got a copy of them. On this here, it says, again, adequate parking for for vehicles being towed. Who determines what's adequate? Again, I would put a number in there. Are we going to have somebody at DOT come down the steps and come out, and what do they consider adequate? Is it 25 cars, 2 cars, 3,000 cars? The city's already maxed out. Are we going to use the numbers at the city yard? I think that needs to be looked at. Who's going to dictate what is adequate? So again, that has not been answered in our rules and regulations. Again, each tow, it states that we want driver's phone or driver's name, addresses, or what have you involved. If we're doing a private property impound or any towing, I don't think a driver's name at all should be on that paperwork. I believe a tow number, like it is now, in the rules and regulations that we already have. We had decided that years ago because we didn't want repercussions for the driver or the property owner. There was different verbiage used. So why we're trying to have it put out, I have no idea. Again, I think that's unsafe, especially in the world today. Would I want somebody that's mad that got their car impounded or a police tow? Know my driver or you, Mr. Yitzy's name and number, going to come to your house, beating on your door, you had this towed? I think that's way inappropriate, way inappropriate. They talk about having work statements, work orders. We already have that technology. We use tow books. The tow ticket is already made out. It's stored in our database in each towing company. I don't see that to be necessary at all. There's no need to have it. If somebody wants a tow ticket, all they can do is call the office, get a copy of the tow ticket. We don't like our drivers having a copy of a tow bill or a tow ticket in their trucks. It's never been that way. So I don't understand what they're trying to accomplish there. They want to know who authorized the tow to be on a tow ticket. I don't believe that's information that anybody should have. Even a tow truck driver should have that. That should be private information. If the city, again, in the rules and regulations, it says it could summons our rules and regulations. Just come, Mr. Brady has done it many times, comes to our facility, they're more than welcome to look in there as far as private property. But I don't really believe that the city should know what, if I tow Mrs. Jones's car, Mrs. Jones has the rights to say they want us to tow it, yes or no. So again, I believe that should be restricted. I believe there are so many other things in this legislation that I believe should be looked through. Again, work studies was something that we originally put out. We'd like to put that out again. I believe this bill, as it stands in its entirety, should be tabled. Let's itemize it down, break down one at a time. Let's go through each one, and we come up with a plausible solution to all of them. And I think I can go through each one of mine. If you'd like, I can continue down. Right, away. If the city again decides of different technology, which I don't believe 911 could do it, I believe what we have already works. Does it need to be probably off? Should I think it should be updated? Yes, I believe a lot of things should be updated.
Modernized.
Yeah, I think it should be modernized, but I believe also doing it one clean sweep is probably way too much, way too fast. Do I think there needs to be a tow board? Yes, I do. Do I think it needs to be encumbersome with the rules and regulations of regular towing and trespass towing? I don't. I think that's way trying to, again, like 911 says, trying to do so much at one time, I just don't think that's good legislation at this point in time.
Okay. All right. Thank you. And you brought up some good points. Actually brought me back to question I had for the law department. Ms. Brown, a couple of things. Again, I haven't, had a chance to really concentrate on these amendments. I assume you've seen them prior to the hearing. With the new amendment number 11, based on what would determine whether or not the city would move forward with, with implementing that technology, no matter what the cost or process may be, who ultimately makes that decision based on after this group would determine. Normally, we know what things cost before we change the law, but if we were to operate backwards and change the law and then see what things cost, what's the purpose of having that in the bill versus just striking out that whole section from the bill? And then if that's something that is necessary, it could be done at a later date.
Mr. Chair, it's my understanding, and I just saw amendment number 11 also, but it's my understanding that if the intent of the sponsor was to strike that section from the bill and just have uncodified language requiring a study, so that wouldn't need to specify what threshold would need to be met for the council to move forward. I think that was just extra information for the council to decide whether or not a new bill down the road, that was my understanding, would be taken up.
So are you saying that based on the current language with that amendment, after this group is done working, they can determine to move forward and implement this technology without further legislation?
No, not if the section was struck from the bill. My understanding, and I apologize if I misunderstood Councilman Dorsey, but I believe he was going to delete the section that requires this technology and then just require a study with no other requirements, just a study to gather data so that the council can have the data. It seems to me during the hearing that there's data that's needed. And so I think the uncodified language just requires a study. And again, if I misunderstood Councilman Dorsey, I apologize. But no, I don't believe if you delete that section, you certainly couldn't move forward with this bill and require that technology because it would be deleted from the bill.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
the email that I sent said strike page 17, lines 1 through 27 in their entirety and add the attached amendment. And the attached amendment requires a study and report. What I'm asking here is to strike page 17, lines 1 through 27 in their entirety.
I understand that. So my question is,
And so then there's no codified text in the bill that says anything about any implementation of any technology. The only thing left in the bill is a thing in the uncodified section at the end of the bill that says, give us a study and report on this.
all right, I understand. And so my question again is, if the council, and I'm pretty sure you've answered the question, I just want to double check, that if the council were to want to require this technology and whatever the cost may be, would that require separate legislation in order to implement, or is that something that a procurement can just start including in contracts?
Mr. Chair, I'm sorry, are you asking me or Councilman Dorsey?
No, I'm asking you. As far as the law department is concerned, that again, the two things: one, if this group, which this work should have been done already, right, so we know what we're dealing with, but if the group says this is going to be, $1 million to do,
right?
Okay, and we say, okay, it's worth spending $1 million to do it. Would it require new legislation, or would the city procurement be able to just start including this in tow companies' contracts?
Well, I mean, that's an excellent question. I mean, you're really asking, do you need legislation to implement this technology, if I'm understanding you correctly? And I honestly, I would think that you would need separate legislation to implement that technology. We haven't looked specifically at that. But again, and I don't have the language, by the way, for Amendment 11. I don't know why I don't have it, but I don't. So a study certainly in an uncodified provision of this bill would not require any implementation. So it wouldn't happen with this bill. Your question is, would you need a bill at all? And I think you would need separate legislation to implement that. But that's something I haven't researched. And I mean, I'd rather research it than give you a final answer.
Right. So you're saying procurement can't require private entities that do business with the city from meeting certain requirements, such as utilizing their technology platform they've outlined.
I believe, and again, I haven't researched this specifically, but I think you would need to give notice to people that they would be required to use that technology. And for that reason, I would think you would need separate legislation.
You're talking about as far as if it's to do it during a current contract terms. I'm referring to the contract expires at the end of the year. You put out a new contract. This work group just determined that, hey, there's this new idea here. It's going to cost, each new tower whatever amount of money it's going to cost to put the trackers in their trucks and to utilize the system. Can they, on their new contract, include that and require those companies to abide by whatever this work group determines?
If the parties who are required to use the technology have noticed that they are required to do that, whether it be in a contract or by legislation, you might be able to do that in a contract. That would be, again, something I'd want to run by my contracts division. But I think if the people who are required to use the technology have noticed that they are required to do that, that's really the legal issue. Do I have notice that I'm required to do that? But yeah, I think you probably could do that by contract.
Gotcha. And so if the bill sponsor could just make sure that you get a copy of that amendment so that once you finish reading it, you can let us know that it's legally sufficient. That would be appreciated.
I sent it over.
Amendment number 11?
Yeah, you have it.
Okay, if it's uncodified and it just requires a study, I'm sure it's legally sufficient, but I'll take a look at the exact language.
Okay, thank you.
For the record, the current law does allow the city to require tow truck drivers to have a GPS or whatever in their vehicle. The current law already allows us to require that of them.
Okay, thank you. All right, the next person up is Charles Parish. I will unmute you now.
Hello,
Charles
can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Hi, good afternoon, and thank you for taking the time. And as I'm Charles Parish, besides being a licensed tower in Baltimore City over the last 30 years, I'm also the trespassing legislative chairman for the state of Maryland's Towing and Recovery Professionals of Maryland. I had the privilege of working with many of the council members past and some of the president and on the state level as well as Councilman Henry back in 2011 when he did his bill, which actually designed what the panel of the tow board is made up of today of the participants, even though it took until 2018 for that board to actually have those members on it. It was passed in June of 2011. So that's a little discouraging. And a lot of the task force to 2012 that made the new state law that used to be effective in Baltimore City and Baltimore County and went statewide. That task force that the governor had done, which was a little over 2 years, had 29 different agencies represented on that task force. I attended every one of the meetings, to which 95% of the participants, from senators, House of Delegates, representatives on the local level, including Baltimore City was well represented, insurance companies. But this 2110A, 1 through 5, which deals with trespassing laws in the state of Maryland, to which the rules and regulations last done in Baltimore City through the tow board of 2012 mirror it. That panel in 2012 included one big component, which is not on this panel, which though I know they've spoken, have not been represented to the councilman who wrote the bill because I've asked. And that's the property management companies, the property owners, the ones who the parts of this bill, including the new amendments that I'm just seeing for the first time, would affect. And under state law, back when it was adopted, the only activity that enforcement that a property owner could do was have a police officer come out and he could write a citation. And that's under 21-1003 paragraph E. And with the penalty, they do it. Then they came up with 21-10A, which was an avenue for the property owners. They then would decide what was allowed, what wasn't allowed, and they would have it removed. You had to have signs posted. In 2012, we took that step further and went with photographs being needed. You had to call in instead of 2 hours. You had to call it in to the police department of that municipality within an hour. Your drivers, they have a set of standards. Certifications have to be met. The equipment has to be met. The main thing is the contract. And that has to identify what violations are to go. A property owner tells the towing company, who is licensed and approved by the city, when and what they are allowed to tow. That has always worked. That has been working. Mike Brady, who was on here earlier, is actually the investigator. When a citizen complains, he's the first one to get that call. Why? His phone number, the 3377, is required to be imprinted on our receipts already. The email address, that's something new I'm seeing under Amendment 10, but the phone number is already there, and it was required. What happened? Some aren't being enforced because they're stamping it. You want to enforce that? Let's do imprint it instead of being able to stamp it. The major point that I have, and I'm dealing with mainly the trespassing right now, the major thing I have is we have a tow board that was used as a model throughout this state by me to other jurisdictions. And I referred to Baltimore City's tow board going back to when Michael Rice was in charge of it. And ever since then, Mr. Unitas and Paul and present day Charlie and then Miss Tina now. That board functioned better than any other jurisdiction in this city, functioned better than anybody. Bobby Curran, who used to be on it, was a big component of it. And we established rules because there was communication between the citizens of the city, the property owners of the city, and the different agencies, including the city council, who was represented on this board, who is, I keep talking like it's not. There is a board in place now for this. So that's already there. But there was open dialogue and communication. This past December, some of these amendments were brought up that I'm seeing today, were brought up at our December meeting, to which were tabled, and that we meaning the towers that are licensed now, and that tow board were going to follow up and discuss. That has never happened. And I feel that is unfair to the property owners, as well as the towers, as well as this committee, because you're not aware of what is in place now. Some of the things that we have now that are in place, we're acting as if we need a law. No, what we need is enforcement of the rules and the rules and regulations that are in place. As Tom has said, we do need to modernize. It's been since 2012. Prior to that, it was 2002. So it's time for us to come back to the table and let's update these. We don't want road towers. Road towers give us bad names. We don't want high bills. That's why we've agreed. Well, federal law says you can regulate our pricing, non-consensual, that is. But, and that's not an issue. We've always agreed. We even agreed in December. And I don't know of any towers except for one or two that ever did go above 350. And shame on them, because when Mr. Kern was in there, Councilman Kern was in there, there was a gentleman's agreement that no towing company would ever go above 350. So I don't know where that loophole happened after he left. I missed that meeting. But the thing is, we want to be part of the solution. Property owners want to be part of the solution. The police department wants to be part of the solution. Yet that work study has not happened with the individual that was writing this bill. And that is what I'm hearing from all the towers that are affected by this bill that would be affected by the bill. That's the calls I'm getting. They want to be part of it. They don't want one-on-ones. They want to be able to talk and discuss it, and not in a time limit to where, okay, we got to decide now and we're going to vote. These latest changes, for one, number 6, 2 wheels off the ground. There's already state law on what's considered being attached. 2 wheels under the ground. What if it's a trailer? What if it's a motorcycle? Wheel lifts are tow trucks. Wheel lifts are the 2 things that have arms that come out from underneath. Those are used more and more in towing with dollies for all-wheel drives because they're easier to get down city alleys. They can fit into garages. Okay, and they're easier to work with when you're doing trespass towing. They only take up 2 wheels.
Mr. Parish, can I ask you a quick question?
Yes.
So you had mentioned about some of the stuff's in state law. In addition to that, what we've learned through this process is that there's a price cap in state law as well. Can you tell us why it is not currently being followed?
There is a state law cap based on your municipality. If the police municipality does not have a pricing regulation in place, the state has said that those municipalities' maximum fee is $250 with a $32 a day storage, a $30 a day storage. Baltimore City, Baltimore County, Anne Arundel County, Harford County all have municipality pricing. So those municipalities are allowed to go 2 times the amount. In Baltimore City, since the initial fee, we're not allowed to do itemized towing. On trespassing, you have the tow fee, which is all inclusive. You have a storage fee, which isn't allowed until at least 12 hours after in Baltimore City. The first 12 hours, there is no storage. You cannot charge. And then you have the admin fee, which you cannot charge for 72 hours. Plus, that admin fee can only be the actual itemized cost to send notification. No matter when you send it, those are the only 3 charges you're allowed to charge.
Right. So how come right now there are towers in the city that are charging more than 2 times the jurisdiction?
Enforcement. If they are, they shouldn't be. And they should be. This is the thing that I don't get. When we find violation, towers with violation, why are we allowing them to have a license the next year?
Well, Mr. Parish, let me ask you a question. What company do you represent?
I'm sorry?
What company do you represent?
Towing company. I'm the resident agent of Vision Record Service.
Vision Record. Okay. What do you guys charge for a tow from Northwest Baltimore to your yard?
Baltimore City, unless our clients request a lower fee, our highest fee that we're licensed with the city is $350 flat.
So how are you charging $350? You're saying the client has to request that you follow double the state law?
Are we talking about trespassing?
Yeah, I mean, just if somebody's parked over the line or they're parked where they shouldn't be, and you come and you tow them.
Yeah, multi-spaces. Trespass tow, every year you have to file a price sheet with the city. The board looks at it. They approve or disapprove your fee. That fee is the highest fee that you're going to charge for a trespassing. I'll give an example. My fee is licensed at $350. Storage is $15. Admin fee is actual cost of $50. That's what my license says is the maximum I can charge for any one of those 3 items. So I have some clients, though, that maybe have low-income housing that have asked that, hey, can you reduce your fee for residents to $300? Can you, or another price? But I cannot go over $350.
So you're telling me that this tow board, which has many towers on it, sets the price?
They approve the price that the tower submits.
They approve the price. So, Ms. Brown, can you elaborate on why this is different than what the state law says and why they're allowed to charge more than double?
Okay, so first of all, let's just be clear that state law only applies to towing from parking lots, which is defined as 3 parking spaces. Just to be clear, because I feel like during the last hearing, there was a lot of talk about state law and towing. And so state law only applies to towing from parking lots. What Mr. Parish said, I agree with. So Baltimore City, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think it's 180. We have a fee set. So the state law says if you're towing from a parking lot, you are capped at twice that fee. So if it's twice 180, it would be, and I'm not a math person, 360. So then the city law and state law allows it to be stricter. So there's express language in the state law that allows the city to be stricter with regard to all of these things. So then the city says, well, the board has to approve your pricing. So what Mr. Parish is saying, his company submits their pricing, and I believe he said 350, which would still, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, but that's still below the state law cap, because the state law cap.
No.
Correct.
Absolutely not. At the previous hearings, we were told it goes off of the 140 number, and it would be double 140, which would be 280. Is that not accurate?
Well, I need DOT to confirm the cost, the towing cost currently, whether it's 150 or 180.
Mr. Brady, can you confirm how much you guys charge for towing?
Well, I don't know all the fees, but I do know that that's just the towing fee itself. That we also charge a $40 admin fee, and if they have any tickets associated with the vehicle, they have to pay those as well. And I've seen people that have as much as $1,000 in tickets.
Right,
So
we're not talking about any of that.
The base that people pay is usually about $220 with all the admin, with all the storage, the admin, and the initial towing fee.
Mr. Brady, that's not the question. We're not asking what average sale price is. The law is stating based on the city price, and including what was outlined is that you can't even charge some of those fees until 12 hours after, or whatever it may be. At the last hearing, it was said to me multiple times that 140 is the number we go off of, and it can't exceed more than 280. The law department last hearing confirmed that. Has that changed?
Mr. Chair, the law department can confirm that the state law caps it at twice what the city tow fee is. If that information that was given to us was incorrect, I mean, I can't confirm what the city charges for the tow fee, if it's 140 or 180. But the state law caps it at twice what the city charges. I think it depends on which side of Charles Street you're on. But if that information was incorrect, that's possible, but that's what we were given.
Okay, Councilman.
Yeah, I think that actually is just kind of, so in her written report before she had done this homework here, it's not 180. That's a mistake. It's 140 on the west side of Charles Street. It's 130 on the east side of Charles Street because the east side of Charles Street is closer to Pulaski Highway. It's 140 is the tops, and that means that twice that is 280. 280 it should be the amount of the cap of the state, and that's Ashley's report. Ashley's opinion from a month or so ago says.
But from my understanding, no one actually pays 140. We charge an admin fee.
Yeah, but beyond but it's not what they pay. That's not what the state law says. The state law doesn't say what people pay. The state law talks about what the tow rate of the municipality is, and the tow rate does not include admin fees. The tow rate does not include the paying of tickets. The tow rate does not include storage fees. The tow rate is a clearly defined standalone figure that is 140 west of Charles Street, 130 east of Charles Street. That is the figure. That is what Ashley's opinion from the law department says from 6 weeks ago or whatever it was. It's cut and dry.
So, Councilman Dorsey, who's required to enforce that rule? Who's
So
that?
here's how we got to the current predicament that we're in. This bill before the committee today requires that there be staffing to the board. At present, there is no required staffing to the board. And so we have just gone on whatever the members of the board could kind of figure out as it goes along. And I've done my best to learn everything that I can along the way. And I've done my best to steer this ship in the right direction. But it is only recently that I learned that, when I joined the tow board literally one day after being sworn into office, I went into my first tow board meeting. And it was at that meeting that the tow board was approving or was tasked with reviewing for approval the annual applications for license renewal for the trespass towers. And in that meeting, and at that point, the licensed towers are required to submit their schedule of charges to the trespass tow board. At that meeting, every single trespass tower showed up with their schedule of charges listing $440 as their normal towing fee. And that seemed the status quo. And I didn't know more than, I didn't know anything more than I did when I walked in the door. And that was the rate that was being approved, despite it seeming astronomical. The following year, after getting a member at large, Quentin Lathan, appointed to the board to fill the vacancy that had existed for years, and a representative of the property management industry to join the board to fill the vacancy that had existed for years, and having a turnover in the trespass towing industry rep, which had not turned over for years. The next round, a year later, the next set of applications that folks brought forth magically said 350 on all of them instead of 450, and that was the rate that we approved. And at that point, unaware, having not had it brought to the board's awareness that there was any state law constraining the amount that could be charged, 350 seemed like a step in the right direction from 440, and so everybody seemed happy with a $90 reduction. And here we are now, another year and a half later, and we're all looking at the fact that there's a state law and going, oh, actually, it's completely unlawful for them to be charging 350. The state law is clear. 280 is the cap.
So thank you for that. Can you answer my question? Who is responsible to enforce that 280 cap today?
If a I mean, look, I think that there's some sort of due process. I'm not a lawyer, but I shouldn't even use the word due process. It's too legalese. But I think that there's some sort of obligation here on the trespass tow board to make a formal declaration to or maybe the city law department. I don't know. City law department could do it. Make a formal declaration to all the trespass towers to say, it's come to our attention that you're charging beyond the legal maximum. We understand that the trespass tow board had some hand in approving this at some point. But at this point, you're on notice. You can't charge more than 280. At the point at which the trespass towers are given notice that they can't charge more than 280, it would be on it would be on the police department. It would be on the trespass tow board to be available to take any reports of trespass tow companies charging more than that. So, I mean, the police department, look, I mean, if it's a violation of the law for them to charge more than 280, the police department could do something about that. But if they brought it to the trespass tow board, certainly I, as a member of the trespass tow board, would say, hey, this is a problem. you need to pay this, portion of this money back, and you need to stop charging this. And if you continue to charge too much, I'm going to personally, as a member of the Trespass Tow Board, move to have you sanctioned and have your license suspended or revoked.
So is the answer right now? So right now there seems to be a debate, and I'm going to unmute the last caller who was on because I cut him off short. But there seems to be a debate between him and the law department. No, there's no debate. Okay, so Ms. Brown, do you agree that the most any tower can charge in Baltimore City for towing somebody from a parking lot, from a shopping center, from an apartment complex is $280?
Mr. Chair, we have consistently said that the state law caps towing from a parking lot at twice the charge authorized by Baltimore City for public safety impound towing of vehicles. If we were given the wrong amount, then I apologize. But if the amount is 140, then yes, twice 140 would be 280. And that's towing from a parking lot. And we've said that consistently. And regardless of what the board does, the state law still governs. So I think there's an enforcement issue. And if we're not asked the question, Mr. Chair, by the board, then they wouldn't have an answer. They didn't, I assume they didn't know to ask the question. So we could have advised them that that was a problem, but we weren't asked the question. If that makes sense.
So is what you just said considered the public declaration that Councilman Dorsey is referring to? Or is there still something that needs interpretation?
I mean, it's not a defense to not know state law as a tower. That's not a defense. So whether they're aware of it or not, the state law is on the books and it applies to them in those circumstances. So the fact that they're not aware of it is not a defense. That would not hold up. So it's not my job or your job to make them aware of that law. That's on them because it's state law. It's on the books. And as far as what we do in the city, the board can be stricter, but they can't allow a higher amount. And again, if we'd been asked the question, we would have advised them of that.
Okay, so I understand that. So I guess one thing I'm going to ask every single tower that gets on and testifies is if they interpret this the same way. Because from this last person who's just talking, Mr. Parish, and I have no idea where his operation is located, he was voicing that he is not under the same impression. And so I'm not accusing anybody of any wrongdoing. I certainly think this is something that was recently discovered, but a concern that you could understand where I would have is, number one, we had a cap in this bill. The cap was removed on this premise, in good faith. And then it seems like this tow board is the one that's been determining a lot of things, but that's also the same tow board that in Amendment 7 will decide what they consider to be reasonable for themselves. So there's certainly a lot of challenges there. And with that, I'll unmute Mr. Parish for you to finish your testimony. I apologize for cutting you off.
Thank you. And Ms. Brown, no, thank you very much. And Ms. Brown, there were some things said in there that Ms. Brown was absolutely correct in what she was saying. There were some things that I don't want to say wrong, but are not being interpreted correct. By the way, just so everybody knows, 2110A041I is what we're talking about, which states it's not a towing fee. It states twice the amount of the total fees normally charged or authorized by the political subdivision for the public safety impound towing of vehicles. Now, Mr. Brady will confirm, because since the Attorney General of 88, Joseph Curran, in his opinion, including the task force and its tow board up until a couple meetings ago with the committee when I first heard this 140, the political subdivision fee for impounding a vehicle in Baltimore City is subdivided, itemized, but it's one fee. That initial fee is either $220 or $230. He also stated that up until when everybody was doing $460. I have been at every tow board except for one, which happened to be the first year that Councilman Kern wasn't there. I took one of those things they call vacations, which hardly some of us ever get. But that was the first meeting. That was the first time that above a 350 was ever approved. I myself know of offhand at least 8 companies, including myself, have never, ever submitted a bid above $350. Never. So I don't know where this illusion that came from. It happened that year. I got word of it immediately from some of the towers. I then also contacted Councilman Curran. I also talked to Paula, who at that time was an industry rep. And we got on it, and we were correcting the board and knowing that you can't itemize. There was a gentleman's agreement. You don't want to charge these fees. We don't want to go down that road. Us towers were the ones that curtailed the other towers from going above $350. But the municipality fee, and Mr. Brady, like I said, he can concur this. The initial, we don't include tickets. That's not part of it. Attorney General Curran, the task force, and this tow board prior to a couple years ago. The municipality fee for an impounded vehicle is either $220 from the east side and then $230 from the west side. So that's where the fee comes in. The towing fee is not what the state law says. Ms. Brown is also correct. You may establish any fee you want, but where our fees were coming on was based on that, based on what we do, based on the fact that you have 24/7, based on our training and certification. The biggest thing was the 24/7 operation. And the Attorney General Curran's opinion of 1088, he's the one that made it reasonable. That's when they came up with that 2 times to begin with, mainly being municipality towing was only required to be open 56 hours, which it still is today, I believe, 56 or 58. But trespassing has always been 24/7, 3 times the amount of hours, 3 times the operations, 3 times the utilities, 3 times the personnel. So that's why the 2 times came into play. Baltimore County, who I helped with theirs was at 1.5. If you did Baltimore City at 1.5, it would be $350. When Councilman Curran, who used to sit on the board, himself, myself, and Paula, we came to that agreement together because it was fair, 1.5 times, even though the state law said 2 times. So that part I would ask. But a lot of these amendments for this tow board, you had asked something too that brought to my attention. The tow board has the authority under the rules and regulations, to which I hope you've been able to get a copy. Ms. Paula had said she'd sent you one. Under these rules and regulations, there is penalties. The board has that authority. Companies have been suspended. Companies have paid back thousands of dollars. Companies are put in front of that tow board where the citizen gets to talk and the tow board judges who was right, who was wrong. The fact that all the members of the board had not been done since Councilman Tendry's designed it in 2011, that wasn't the tower's fault. We were trying to get this. We want the road towers gone. When we did that state task force, a lot of those $1,000, and I actually heard you say it too, about the $1,000, there's no tower who can legally license charge something like that.
So, Mr. Parish, again, how are you guys charging $350 or the $440 if we were charging? Yes, Ms. Brown.
Mr. Chair, I just want to point out something. And again, Mr. Parish and I think we're on the same page. We weren't disagreeing. But I just want to point out that part of the problem here is that public safety impound towing is being interpreted in different ways. That's what I'm hearing. So we're saying that it's just the tow fee, which I believe is $140, depending on where you are on Charles Street. But I'm hearing Mr. Parish say it was interpreted as $220. So I think there's an ambiguity maybe in the law, or at the very least in the state law, at the very least it's being interpreted in different ways. And that would answer your question as to why they would approve something that is above what we thought was the cap, because it's not clear what the cap is. The state law doesn't define it.
Right. And I understand that there must be some misinterpretation, and that's why I'm not accusing anybody of anything doing. I don't think anybody's doing anything wrong intentionally. And I'm not saying they're doing anything wrong at all. I'm just simply trying to understand, moving forward, are towers allowed to continue charging $350 for towing somebody out of an emergency lane in front of an apartment building. They charge $350 for that. Like they are yesterday, can they continue charging $350?
Well, the state law cap only wouldn't apply to emergency tow. It would only be the parking lot tow.
That's what I'm talking about, a parking lot.
I'm sorry, I thought you said out of an emergency lane, or this is private parking lots.
Okay.
So again, I mean, you are identifying an area of state law that people are interpreting different ways. So the question is, what exactly is the public safety impound towing fee for Baltimore City? We interpreted that as I keep getting my numbers wrong, 140, I think it was 140 or 130. But Mr. Parish, who, is in the industry, is saying that it's 220. And the state law doesn't clarify that. So I was under the impression it was just the towing fee and not anything else. And I was told that was 140. And again, if I was misinformed, then I was misinformed. But that was my interpretation. But Mr. Parrish says it's 220, so they must be including another fee.
Right, but the difference here, though, from what I'm hearing with their process, is that they cannot charge certain fees until hour 12. So if somebody goes ahead and has their car towed, parking lot towing, that's the right term, parking lot towing. The city will charge $140 for that, right? Now there's other fees. Yes, if you have parking tickets, you have to pay that. We're not talking about that, and no one's interpreting that. If you get your car towed from Mr. Parrish's company, okay, and you see them take your car and they're driving down the street, you get in your friend's car and you follow them there, you get to the tow yard at the same time as them, you'd like to get your car back. Do you interpret it the same way I do, which is that you should be able to hand them $280?
I believe the actual towing fee is capped, yes, at twice our public safety towing fee. That's the way I interpreted it. Right. That's what the law department interpreted it before. So I don't understand where 220 is coming from, and it's an area of state law that's not clear. And that's why we're having a problem.
Right, I think I understand where they're coming from. I mean, the number, certainly if you add in other fees, you're certainly to a higher number, but that's not what the state law says. And number two, the private companies don't have the same ability that the city has. They have to wait a certain amount of time before charging certain fees. And so, again, I guess we're at this point. I think we're all on the same page. I hope so. I'm going to ask Mr. Parish in a second. But we're at the point where we have this tow board. I don't know who's on the tow board. I know Councilman Dorsey is. I know some other people testifying say they're on it. But the tow board, which is supposed to regulate the industry, they seem very knowledgeable about it. And yet, we removed a cap based on the premise that there already is a cap. And now we're finding out that there's different interpretations, which, it doesn't surprise me. I mean, that's kind of standard. So I'm not living in the past. I'm just looking forward to the future. And my question is going to be for all the towers, are they going to be charging $280 moving forward? And if they continue to interpret otherwise, that's fine. That just obviously is different than what we interpret and what you're interpreting. And we now need to find out who it is that actually is responsible for this. That also gives me great pause, like in Amendment 7, where we're asking this tow board to decide what's considered reasonable when you can have so many different opinions on the same thing and so many different interpretations. And so that's where I'm at. So, Mr. Parish, do you agree moving forward that the cap from parking lot towing is $280?
Well, if I may explain, no, but let me just use your scenario, which was perfect. And I want to give two real quick. A car gets towed off a private lot at 2 p.m. in the afternoon, gets taken to Mr. Parrish's lot. My license right now, that customer comes at 2:10 p.m. he's going to pay $350. That car got towed off the public street, towed to the city yard at 2 p.m. He gets to the city yard at 2 p.m., not including tickets or nothing else. If he just had to pay for that impound fee, the towing, it would cost him $220 minimum. Same scenario, but it's 7 o'clock at night. That car gets towed at 7 p.m. to Mr. Parish's lot. At 7:10, he's going to come. It's going to cost him $350. That car gets towed at 7 o'clock at night to the city yard. He's got to wait till the next day. I believe it's 8 o'clock or 8:30. And it's going to cost him $220, but he's got to wait to that next day. Now, what I just gave you in those scenarios with those prices, it's not an interpretation. It's fact. Mr. Brady, I'm sure, will confirm what I just gave in those two scenarios are fact with the pricing and what would happen to the consumers.
So I just want you to know that the city law department feels that that's not the number you can go off of.
That was her interpretation.
Yeah.
But I was saying it's fact. Mr. Brady, what they're saying is 140. The state law doesn't say towing fee. It says the municipality towing impound. To get the impound cost, it's $220. The individual, just like with an accident tow, if an accident tower takes the car to the lot, the tower's paid $95. If the tower, licensed medallion tower, takes it to their own lot, they can charge the consumer $160. So there's fees that are not being exactly identified as what they are. But in trespass towing, there is only 3 fees allowed. The initial trespass, an admin fee, like I stated before, you have to wait 72 hours, and it's only the actual cost. And then storage, which you're not allowed to charge for the first 12 hours.
Right.
But that initial impound fee, which cannot be itemized, is based upon the actual municipality impound cost.
Right, Mr. Parish, I hear what you're saying. I'm just telling you that that's not how it's being interpreted on this end. And furthermore, I guess one of the things I would just ask you to think about is that some of those items that you listed, you yourself said you cannot charge those within a certain amount of hours. And so you can't base it off of what it technically would cost in total between admin fee and other fees and charge that in your yard if somebody comes and picks up their car 10 minutes after you got it there, because you're not legally allowed to charge those fees until a certain amount of hours have passed. And so
only storage and admin, then they're separate from the impound fee. There's 3 different fees. The impound fee is set. Whatever your license says is the maximum. The admin and storage are listed separate in state law as well in Baltimore City rules and regulations. Those fees are not applied to the impound fee. They're based upon the impound municipality fee.
Councilman Dorsey, you want to weigh in on that?
Yes, thank you. The state law addresses all 3 of these things. To summarize what Mr. Parish is saying, I think, is that the city charges not just for towing immediately, they also charge administrative fees and storage fees immediately. The combination of those 3 things come to $220. But the state law is explicit about this. The state law says, unless otherwise set by local law, a person who undertakes the towing or removal of a vehicle from a parking lot may not charge the owner of the vehicle, the owner's agent, the insurer of record, or any secured party more than 1, twice the amount of the total fees normally charged or authorized by the political vision for the public safety impound towing of vehicles. So this first item is explicitly just about towing. 2, notwithstanding 16207F commercial law article, the fee normally charged or authorized by the political subdivision from which the vehicle was towed for the daily storage of impounded. So item 2 speaks specifically to storage as something that is separate entirely from the calculation of twice the towing fee. And then it says 3, if the political subdivision has not established a fee, then it's set at $250 for towing and $30 per day for storage. That's not a factor here because we as a political subdivision have a fee. So number 4 here says subject to subsection B of this section, the actual cost of providing notice under this section. So the state law setting a cap on trespass towers explicitly addresses the calculation of the twice the towing fee, and separate from that, storage fees, and separate from that, an administrative fee for giving notice. It's not, it shouldn't even be open for debate. And at the end of the day, the city law department is who interprets laws for the city of Baltimore. People don't try to interpret laws however they see.
My last thing, and I don't want to drag it out. I know you have more to talk about, but the only thing, and you read it exactly right. But what you're doing is you're putting fees in there a lot more times than is really said. Fees is only said one time under 1I, twice the amount of the total fees normally charged or authorized by the political subdivision for the public safety impound towing of vehicles. Total fees normally charged. Mr. Brady has already said earlier, and I've said it again, $220 is the total fees normally charged. You cannot get a car out of impound
Mr. Parish,
from a
Mr.
public
Parish,
safely impound.
Mr. Parish, you're putting the emphasis on the wrong word. You're putting the word on total. You're putting the emphasis on total fees when the sentence structure clearly places the emphasis on towing.
I'll agree to disagree, and that's fine. The other thing, if I may go, because the law department, you're right, interpretation is everything in law, and believe me, for 30 years, I'm not a lawyer, but interpretations have always made great arguments. The other parts of the bill and the RFPs and the rules and regulations from 2229 through 2246, I don't feel should be in the law when they're already being designed in the RFPs and the rules and regulations. With that being said, and why I say that is, if you make it law, the purchaser, when he's doing the RFP, whether it be the police department or whoever, when it's coming into towing, is going to make it hard for some, and it's going to take some safety issues out. I love the idea of combining police and trespassing. I've said that from the beginning. I love the idea of there being stronger enforcement, stronger penalties to include, which we have stated over the years, that if a tower is suspended and he's gone through his appeal process, which is listed in the rule and regulations and is listed in the RFPs that have been put out, there should be more of a penalty. He shouldn't be allowed to apply the next year. There should be reform in what that tower is doing. We're never going to clean up towing, making rules for those who don't follow rules. And that's always been my strongest saying. If the fees are based upon what they're to be based upon, so be it. If the hours are to be what they are to be, so be it. But if we're going to have a tow board, then let's have a tow board that's going to listen to everybody. Everybody meaning those affected. The police, property owners, not a property owner, but property owners represented. such as the MMHA, who represents thousands, IREM, who represents thousands that operate in this city, whether it be residential or commercial. Let the towing board, we have an industry rep that sits on the board, but that's what they are. They're a rep. They don't speak for everybody unless we're together and we can talk. But what good is it for us to get together and talk if the board's not going to talk to us? And that's all we want. We want the chance to communicate. We want the chance to work out the issues that are affecting those citizens who have been wronged. Towing is a complaint industry. Nobody in my 30 years, when I've been in towing, ever woke up and said, Charlie, thank you for taking my car. Nobody. It's very rare you get a thank you for changing a tire on a highway. But more or less, trespassing isn't a thankful thing. It's a complaint-driven industry for everybody involved. So if we can make it fair and reasonable, let's do it. But we need to be able to communicate. And I thank you for listening, and I'm sorry if I made things more confusing. Thank you.
No problem. Can I ask you one more question, Mr. Parish?
I'm sorry.
Yeah, just one more question for you. Do you currently tow for the city?
Yes, I do. And I have for 30 years.
You have for 30 years.
Yes, sir.
So have you thought about, if some of these upgrades, these technology upgrades, are you supportive of those upgrades and having the tracking systems and installing those in your vehicles?
No, sir.
What's that?
No, sir. I'm an old firefighter from Baltimore City as well. I love that communication. Where it went to the firehouse, I yelled at the guys, let's go. We slid the poles, we jumped on the truck. Towing companies are the same basic idea. You give me the call to my dispatcher who I've trained to handle the calls, who knows what truck to send, what personnel to send. We don't hire everybody to do every job. We are a specialty. Every piece of equipment does not handle every job. It's specialty. So it should come to somebody that's under our control as an owner. It would be my dispatch. I do not want calls going to my drivers for various reasons. Safety wise for the city, safety wise for my insurance premium, and just my whole operation and reputation.
And what about the costs? Are you willing to cover costs that are involved?
I'm sad to say, but I've already made it clear that this will force me into earlier retirement than I had planned.
So if that stuff were to happen, you're saying you no longer would tow for the city?
That's correct.
All right, thank you. I'll move on to the next one. Dallas Lewis, do you have anything to, any testimony? Okay, call in user number 3. Are you there, user number 3?
Hello?
443-983. Do we hear you? Do you have any testimony?
Oh, good
Yes.
evening. Good afternoon. Mr. Chairman, can you hear me?
Yes, if you can just introduce, we don't know who you are, what your name is and what company you're with.
I am not with any of the companies, Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
I'm council member Robert Curran. 21 years on the city council, Mr. Chairman, and 18 of those years I did tow legislation in front of my committee, or I was a lead sponsor of such legislation. Councilman, lead sponsor of the bill, succeeded me on the city council and also succeeded me on the tow board. I know that you want to hear from the AG reps, but I wish that the chair and the committee members would get a chance to let me say some of my historical knowledge of towing in this town, Mr. Chairman. First of all, I wish that and I applaud the sponsor for trying to tackle on the tow industry. It's not an easy thing to do, Councilman Dorsey. I tried it for many years and it was partially successful and partially not successful. But I wish that the legislation would break up, not try to do everything, Mr. Chairman, in one quick swipe, but to take on trespass towing as a component of towing in the town, police towing, which includes the impound towing, and of course, then you got the private consensual towing. So there is 3 components to towing in this town. The ones that our constituents that we represented and you guys represent now is the trespass towing, where people get a little irate when they're towed off of private property. I wish that the legislation would tackle that first, and then subsequently legislation would tackle the police towing, which includes the impounds. And let me just state for the record, when I was doing towing industries 12, 15 years ago as chairman of the Judiciary Committee and as lead sponsor of legislation on towing, on trespass towing, to be clear, at the time, may have changed, the tow rate maximum for trespass towing was twice the fees charged for the local impound tow rate, which included the $140 for the towing alone, correct. It also included $50 for up to the first 3 days of storage. And that law was changed by this councilman back in the days where it was $25 a day. I changed it to $50 for the first 3 days of storage. And then you add in the time $40 for the administrative fee, which gave it to $230, which meant that the cap for trespass towing at the time was $460. Working with the towers, with the different trespass towers, all except one went down to $350 for their maximum tow rate, under the sword of Damocles that if they didn't come up with a figure that was conducive, that we were going to put a cap on it ourselves. And the towers all agreed except one to make it $350. That's how the $350. And I know that Miss Brown wasn't, I know that Mr. Peter was in the law department back then. He may have reference to this because we all had agency reports from the law department back on these bills, Mr. Chairman. So that was the rate at the time I was doing the cap on the trespass towing. That should be one issue that should be resolved. I applaud the sponsor for having a tow board that's going to take in all the concerns of the towing in this town. The police towing is sometimes when we don't have it controlled, it turns into an insurance fraud. You don't pay for it out of your pocket. Your insurance company pays for it, and the entire citizens of Baltimore pay for it. And the insurance fraud is perpetrated on towing in this town by the gypsy towers, we used to call them, the ones that weren't on the medallion towers or approved by the tow board. So I just wish that all 3 of the components don't get done with a broad swipe, that we kept the regulations on towing in this town, which needs to be regulated in different segments. The trespass part of it, the police impound part of it, and the consensual private tows are part of it. So, Mr. Chairman, I just want to clarify you. Me, myself, open to questions by members of the committee, yourself, Mr. Chairman. But I have some historical knowledge of towing in this town. I tried to rein them in, and I have reined them in the best that I can. We have changed laws over the years. The mandate that you have to have a phone number on there where you can call if you trespass towed to be have your case heard from the tow board. I've heard 4 times a year, 3 times a year, whenever we used to meet over 10, 20 years. I've been to 40 or 50 of these tow boards as a representative of the city council to the tow board. I know what I hear. I see what I see. And tell you the truth, Mr. Chairman, and to the sponsor, continue to do what you do, but do it in a way that is concise, that you can figure out what everyone knows what we're doing and how it is best to do for the citizens of Baltimore in general. Not just for the towers, not just for the city by increasing fees, but for the citizens of Baltimore that you guys serve now and I served for 21 years of my years in the city council. With that, Mr. Chairman, I'll leave back any questions that members of the council committee would like to have of me.
Does anybody have any questions for the councilman giving testimony? Nope. Okay, thank you very much for your testimony. We'll move on to the next caller. The next caller is call-in number 5-410-456. I'm unmuting you. Do you have any testimony? Caller number 5. Your phone number starts. Yes.
Okay. My name is Bill Ersing, and I'm with Jim Elliott's Towing. We're a longtime vendor for Baltimore City for the police department. My main point of contention was the BPD and the sophisticated and costly solution that would have been involved. I will not go there. I have 2 questions. After the study, and you had asked one of the other towers this question, there's no possible way that I could incur the charge for a GPS. We have 10 trucks. Somebody threw out the $1 million cost. If we had to pay $2,500 on average for a GPS system put in our truck, that would put us out of business. Secondly, on the BPD issue, it states that the Department of Justice has to get approval for the consent decree. And what would be involved in that? Is that a costly solution? Is that a time-consuming solution? And one other thing, I think the amendments should have been dispersed to everybody before they come out 11 minutes after this virtual meeting started.
9 minutes.
Oh, excuse me, 9 minutes. And that's all I have.
All right, thank you for your testimony. And while we have you here, you tow for the city, you said?
Yeah, we're a medallion tower.
Okay. And do you interpret the state law the same way Mr. Parish does, that you could technically charge up to $440, or do you interpret it the same way that the bill sponsor and law department is, that you technically can only charge $280?
Well, trespass towing is not my forte. We do municipality work, and we do a lot of dealer and customer work. I couldn't answer to any trespass questions.
Gotcha. Understood. I appreciate that. Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Caller number 6, are you there? 410-925.
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes. If you can just introduce yourself, tell us who you are.
How you doing? My name is Malik Stuckey. I'm the owner of Universal Towing. I'm one of the select companies in the room that actually provide a variety of services for Baltimore City. Right now, we are a medallion towing company. We handle also heavy wrecks, which is tractor trailer, accidents on 83 and 295. So we're the company that helps you keep 295 open. Just wanted to make a couple of points, keep it brief. I'm 41 years old. I've been in business 19 years. I've been blessed to tow in the same neighborhood that I grew up in. One of the points that I hear going back and forth, in that state law bill, when I first got my license almost 15 years ago for trespass towing, it was stated to me it was based on how much it costs for someone to get their car out of the city impound yard. So the twice of that fee, which was $220. So that, yes, it was $440, but to no one's ever gotten approved for that $440 because the towing board regulated that for public safety. So one of the issues I wanted to highlight as far as the GPS in the trucks, our Baltimore City Police RFP has that in the contract. where we have to be able to, at any given moment, give that information to the city, usually, and to Mr. Brady, who is the claims investigator for medallion and trespass issues, if we have an issue with a tow that happens in the city. I have Verizon Connect right now, and I'll be honest with you, I just barely can afford it right now because I have about 14 trucks. But it does save me money because I'm able to see where my trucks are, how fast they're going, and what they have on the truck. We just had some integrated videos added, but if the city added another software to the trucks, it would be more than I could handle, and we would not be able to tow for the police. As I stated, last year we had 20 trucks. Due to insurance costs and increased minimum wage, we had to downsize to about 14 trucks. The CAD system now I'm also one of the only owners in the room, besides Phil here from Jim Elliott's, that actually works on the street, and I also am in communications daily with the police department. The CAD system that we have in place for Baltimore City is still pretty new. It came out pretty much around about 2013 and 2014. One of the issues I know on the ground is if there's a 3-car accident, sometimes if three officers show up to the same scene, we get 3 different dispatch. And based on the way the CAD system comes up for the operators right now, they're unable to see all the information. So we already know how it works ahead of time, that we're sending a truck that can grab more than one call, because there's a chance that on the way they're going to give you another car at that same scene. Like I said, we do 295. 9 times out of 10, if a car has heavy rear end damage, something ran in the back of it. So we automatically send 2 trucks. Another system that was also integrated is Baltimore City Impound Yard. They also changed their system back in 2014. So we have all these different new systems that are coming into place, but the problem is they're not integrated efficiently for everybody in the city to be able to work together, and vendors. Also wanted to highlight a couple other points. Right now, the city yard does not have night shift. Pretty much the only time that any city tow truck driver is out after 6 and before 4 a.m. is if there's a baseball game or a football game. But once that game is over, those tow truck drivers go in, and pretty much from what I understood from the Transportation Towing Division, it is a cost issue. The city, just like us, has problems finding, people to be able to pass drug tests, be able to pass clean background checks. So they have to keep the same drivers, which means these drivers are getting time and a half. So it became a cost issue of why there isn't a third shift. So right now, nighttime, the private companies, we are the ones that handle everything pretty much after midnight. And also from 4 a.m. with scofflaws, we also help the city with that also. In reference to the abandoned vehicles, right now, there was a direct order from Transportation Towing Division to the police department not to tow the abandoned vehicles due to the capacity issue at the city impound yard. The transportation head was correct. They will come and remove the vehicles, but right now there isn't anything in place for the abandoned vehicles to be moved due to the capacity issue at the city yard. So we, as private vendors, we have been storing the abandoned vehicles because right now we cannot tow them to the city impound yard. But if a police officer calls, we're not going to turn down the call. We will tow the vehicle. One of the things, like they said, if you implement that GPS system, one of the issues is when we get a call from Baltimore City Police, we tried our best to help them. Our average time that we're on the phone with them is 18 seconds. Hey, Universal, we got a call, 295. How many cars? What truck are you giving us? And then we're off the phone. So for them to see which truck we have or where the truck is located would definitely be an inconvenience to them because working with the CAD system that they have in place, a lot of times it is very confusing. So one of the other issues I don't think anybody's highlighted on the trespass issue, this is just a personal thing that I thought of that I noticed the other day, is that right now in our city with things going through a tough time, most of the cars that people are getting parts from and anything they need for their used car are coming from junkyards. The cars that they get from the junkyards actually come from the towing companies that are removing these vehicles from private properties that no one comes and gets. So it's an ecosystem because, a poor person is now able to go to an auto parts, junkyard and be able to get car parts at a very low price. So one of the, let me see, I think that was one of the issues. That was pretty much it. But I would definitely like to answer any questions that the council or anyone has.
All right. Doesn't seem like there's any questions. Thank you very much. And we'll move on to the next caller, Norman McCarthy.
Yes, sir. Can you hear me?
Yes.
How are you?
Good. How are you?
Very good. I got a few things I want to touch on, and I'm not going to try to draw it out. One,
Can you tell us who you.
I'm with Mick and Mick. Mick and Mick Recovery. I'm sorry.
Say that again.
Mick and Mick Recovery. MC and MC Recovery.
Okay.
I tow just trespass towing. The gentleman that was it past Kearns, Mr. Kearns, was just called in not long ago. My question, you asked the guy from Elliott's what he thought as far as how he interpret. I interpret the same way that Charlie Colvin does, or Charlie Parish does, and the same way that Councilman Kearns did, because I've talked to him at different times. Actually, Mr. Kearns came to our facility. I actually have a letter from him telling him that we're a shining example of what a tow company should be. And the interpretation, as he said it, so I don't know why it would be a question now. If you're going back to the source that was there when they put it together, and he's telling you that they interpreted it to be 220, why would it still be a question for the legal? I guess I don't understand. He said what it is. So with that, as far as the trucks and what we put out, I don't know how many of you guys have ever had, or the council, women, men, whatever, have had things to where you've been paid a certain amount and then they take it back from you. In our industry, we've gotten a certain rate, we do what we're supposed to do, and then the fees are going to dwindle because somebody interprets something different. And back when we had the discussion in 2012 with Bobby Kearns, that was part of the issue, but we went through it and we got it to where everybody agreed. And of course, there's some people that don't do things that they're supposed to, and that's for the board to go ahead and write them up and do whatever they need to do to get them out of the industry. And you would see that everybody in the industry would back that, because all they do is give us all a bad name. As far as Baltimore City, I don't know if you guys look at the murder rate and different things. It's tough towing you out of the city. The fees are what the fees are. We don't do a lot of Baltimore City towing, but what we do, we have issues. Back on 418, I had one of my drivers had a pistol in his face. I actually had three, got pistol whipped with one. And the thing is, that's what goes on. Why he taking people's stuff in the city. So there's different things that happen. I don't know of anybody that I've heard of the city council or people that work for the city that have that kind of work situation where, I'm 64. I've had my third back surgery. My last surgery, they couldn't get my rate up over 20. The surgery before that, I died. I was dead for 23 minutes. But I come back 2-3 weeks after back surgery, I'm back in the truck. Why? Because we can't get people. Because of guns in their face or things that happen or the rate, you know what I mean? The virus, we're shut down with that. I do repossessions as well as impounds. The repossessions were shut down on. The impounds were shut down on for expired tags. That's 80% of my business. So when Charlie said he's ready to retire, and everything I'm listening to today, and I'm listening to politicians, because that's what I feel. I'm listening to a politician say, well, this is how I interpret it, and this is how it's going to be. But that same politician is going to come and ask me for money, or somebody's going to ask me to do something that to me, it shouldn't be. You know what I mean? I shouldn't have to, and that's something that I like to see. Anybody that's affiliated with the tow board politically shouldn't come to us for any kind of donations. We shouldn't be giving donations, because to me, that's kind of a problem in itself. As to, I did you a favor, do me a favor. Now, my thing is, I've been out of work since March the 13th. I've been shut down. 80% of my business I can't do. I was going to ask you guys if you could subsidize something and give me some money. You know what I mean? Try to help me out as a tower, since I've been loyal to the city, trying to help things out. I don't see, and this is what gets me too. I'm listening to people going after towers. You know, we're these bad people. I've talked to Councilman Dorsey. I talked to him in Annapolis. I have a mobile unit now with a patent, and we could give the city. And I try to talk to people in the city. 5 units would get you $2.5 million in your pocket. Doesn't cost you a dime. So all this stuff that you're talking about, you need funds for. We could give it to you. But and it's for safety. It's for distracted driving. But I don't hear anything on that. All I hear is how we're ripping people off. And believe me, the people that I tell, and Mr. Kearns could testify, I showed him 30% of the people we tell, just like Charlie said, we give a discount. People are gonna put a gun in somebody's face or call one of my girls at a name. When they come here, guess what? They're gonna pay the maximum fee. That's just the way the industry is. You know, you cater to some, and then others, you just do what you got to do. So I interpreted it as 220 back when I talked to the Councilman Kearns. Another thing that I would like you guys to think of is the cost. We talked last time, the cost of our vehicles, the trucks. You know, trucks are crazy money. I had an impound we did at Hillendale Shopping Center, which is in Baltimore County. While my driver was there, I had somebody pour something in the depth fluid. When they poured it into the depth fluid thing, I just got my bill. My truck's back out of service, was down for 3 weeks. I'm still paying insurance on it. I still got to make the payment on it. And I just paid $37, $25, $22 on it. So these are the kind of things. When something goes down, it's not cheap. I guess somebody slices tires, it's over $1,800. So I appreciate being in business. I appreciate working. But I can't. I don't think I continue to stay in the industry because it's too political, and that's just it's crazy. As far as you guys not having room, I have room in my yard. If you guys want to store something here, I'll help you out. Okay, I have about an acre here, if that'll help you guys. And let me see. There's something else I wanted to say. Another thing, just as far as cost, my facility here, I just paid my taxes. I called to ask, could they give me some kind of a payment on it or give me a little bit of break? I just paid 14 grand in taxes for my property here. And a gentleman laughed and said, if I don't pay it, then it goes to a tax sale. I explained to him we've been out of business pretty much. 80% of our business has been shut down since March. So these are things that, you know, you figure something back in 2012 on a rate. I've never charged 440. I don't know where 440 is as far as if there's somebody charging it, then maybe that person needs to be pulled up. But as far as the rate, I think that when you do your studies should come out. Come to my facility. I'll let you see what I pay for fuel. I'll let you see what I pay for these trucks. I'll let you see what I pay for my driver. And then I'll let you see my bank account where since March, mid-March, to date, and I still got to figure out last month, I'm $380,000 out of my pocket to stay in business. So I asked myself, why am I still doing this? So I'm done. I appreciate you listening to me, and I'm sorry for being all over the place, but this it's not, you know, it is what it is. Have a great day. Thank you, sir.
Thank you for your testimony. Paula Pertani. Paula, are you there?
Here, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good afternoon. Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and committee members. I want to sincerely thank this committee for once again extending their time and consideration on this very important legislation. Again, I will introduce myself. My name is Paula Protani. I represent 3 towing companies, Frankfurt Towing, Mel's Towing, and Ted's Towing. Anyone who has read any of my emails is aware of my background and my 42 years in the towing industry. Presently, Frankfurt Towing, Mel's Towing, and Ted's Towing are licensed medallion police tow companies. Frankfurt Towing and Ted's Towing are also licensed trespass tow companies. I spoke to many other colleagues in the towing industry, and we do agree that there is a need for some parts of this legislation. We're not against licensing tow trucks or tow companies. We also agree that expanding the authority of the current tow board to be used as the vehicle to establish rules and regulations to oversee the towing industry, etc., is logical and appropriate. With that much being said, I would like to offer two amendments. My first one would be to strike from this bill from section 2227 through and including 2246. This has to do with the standards of operations, all kinds of things that are included in this bill. With the exception, in those areas, with the exception of 2230, these entire sections are taken from the current rules and regulations for medallion towing and the current rules and regulations of trespass towing. I personally sent every committee member a copy of both of these sets of rules and regulations. It's my understanding that this bill says that this board, it states that the board must adopt rules and regulations to carry out the subtitle. I don't feel that the rules and regulations, that the rules that are contained in 2227 through 2246 belong in this bill because the board must adopt them. So I would ask that that be struck out entirely. I also want to speak to something that no one has spoke to before. At the very end of the bill, under Article 1, where we're speaking to Environmental Control Board, I imagine citations and civil citations, subtitle 22 towing, 2235, it specifically says, collecting fee from a non-compliant parking facility, $1,000. I'm not quite sure what that is, but I think I may have an idea. But I am still perplexed. Why should it be the responsibility of any privately owned tow company to make sure a commercial parking lot is in compliance with Baltimore City, whatever that means? If that tow company has not renewed their license, if they didn't, I'm sorry, parking lot. I'm so sorry. This means that we have to be responsible for any private parking lot, commercial parking lot, that they're in compliance in Baltimore City. If that parking lot has not renewed their license, if they didn't submit their monthly parking lot taxes, if they have a zoning violation or any other reason that makes them non-compliant, it is not, and it should not be my responsibility to know these things, research them, however often required, and then have us be sanctioned, me as a tow company, with a $1,000 fine if this private parking lot is out of compliance. It's ludicrous, and I don't think the onus needs to be put on the private tow company. So I would respectfully request that that would be struck two places from this bill. The other thing that I wanted to address, which may or may not be pertinent at this point, is the police towing. That is the basic volume of what I do, is police towing for Baltimore City. And I'm going to refer to the police towing in this bill as an Uber type tow. I'm against it for a lot of reasons, but I'm going to speak to one or two of the main reasons, and it's just food for thought, depending how things go with the amendment to remove it from this legislation. But it's my feelings, if this bill passes in its present form, there's nothing to stop out of area tow companies, for example, Washington, D.C., to send a fleet of trucks to Baltimore to tow. This bill does nothing to ensure that the Baltimore City-owned business comes first. As a matter of fact, my opinion is that this bill welcomes all outsiders to come into Baltimore City to tow. There's absolutely nothing in this bill that speaks to any kind of business presence within Baltimore City proper. The bill states you must have a storage lot within 10 miles of towing a vehicle. Even that does not mean that the storage lot has to be located within the city. Lots can be in Baltimore County or Anne Arundel County. As a Baltimore City located business that pays taxes to Baltimore City, employs Baltimore City residents, contributes to the financial economy of Baltimore City, I feel there should be something added to this bill to give me and every other Baltimore City-based tow company preference. My second point of this Uber towing is perhaps none of us have adequately explained what it is to, we haven't educated you on what it is to do medallion towing and why the Uber police type would not work. It is not practical for police towing. While Uber type dispatch is currently used by some motor clubs, motor club towing is not emergency police towing. There is a vast difference between emergency police towing and AAA towing. And while anyone and everyone who has ever been broken down and waiting for a tow truck considers their situation to be an emergency and of utmost importance, it is not a true emergency in the sense of a police tow. Generally, police towers demand a quicker response time for many reasons. Streets are blocked by the accident, traffic is impeding, sometimes severely, police officers are needed back in service ASAP. These are just a few of the things. Past that, who knows if an Uber tow truck will provide a quicker response to an emergency police tow? I certainly don't, but I do know without a doubt that Uber police towing will not adequately fulfill the needs of the police department or Baltimore City or our residents. How many Uber trucks are going to be available at 2 a.m. on a cold, rainy morning? How many Uber trucks are going to be available on weekends or on holidays or cold winter nights or during the snow and ice, early morning hours, late night hours? You pick it. How many trucks will be available? 2, 10, none? Who wants to roll the dice on this? And why would this responsible committee want to take a chance on this possibly happening? In order to maintain the higher standard that police towing requires, tow companies need to be 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. It's my opinion the stakes are way too high not to have this as a requirement for police towing. And another point that I wanted to bring up on the Uber, everyone has touched this, and that's the cost associated with putting GPSs in our trucks. Through our 3 companies, we have approximately 60 tow trucks. I also have more than 60 employees, most of who are Baltimore City employees. There's no way that I can afford to outfit 60 trucks, buy software, get hardware, pay for the installation, pay monthly fees. I cannot financially do it on the money that I am making with Baltimore City. We're in business to make a profit, not to lose money. We're not the city. We have people that depend on us for jobs, to make a decent living, and a decent wage. All of that would go by the wayside for my companies, which I'm personally responsible for at this time, if this Uber type towing is passed. And one other thing that I was not prepared to talk to, but I do want to address, is on this trespass towing that's been the center of a large part of this discussion. I sat on that trespass tow board for many, many years. When the legislation, it is not the tower's opinion here that we are entitled to twice the 240. And I want to say my fee is 250. It's never been 350. It's always been 250. Councilman Dorsey stated everybody came in at 350. I just need to correct that for the record. But the fee that we were allowed to charge, it was determined by the tow board. Our tow board always had legal counsel on it. At one time, Jill Carter, who's now a state delegate, she was the legal counsel for the tow board. We had Steve Sharkey. We even had Jim Green, who's now a judge. He sat on our tow board as legal counsel. So when the rules and regulations were adopted, when the prices came into play, it wasn't what the towers wanted or what the tower said. It was what the board allowed. And we didn't, the board, me being part of the board, didn't just allow it to appease the towers. So I just wanted to be very clear with that. While everybody's talking about what's your opinion, this is actually how it came about. It was not the towers, it was from the board. And the talk that I heard today also makes the board sound a little bit less credible. We're asking, the Councilman Dorsey is asking, let's put give this board more authority. Well, I take offense to that because I sat on that board for many years, and this board has always, me and everyone that has ever been on it, we have operated with integrity inside the law. We had our legal counsel, and it is a good vehicle to move forward. If I was an outsider listening in today, I would think, geez, who wants to give that board more authority? They're not even governing the people they're supposed to be governing now. But that is truly not a fact. That's all I have to say. I can't hear you. I'm sorry. I'm down.
You're muted, Mr. Chair.
I can't hear.
Mr. Chair, you're muted.
I'm sorry. Thank you. Caller number 7, would you like to provide testimony? 443-559. Do you have any testimony? Nope. Next up, Lisa Jones.
Sure. Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. I'm Lisa Harris Jones, and I'm here on behalf of Quick Response, as well as Harris Jones Real Estate. I'm a property owner here in Baltimore City, owning commercial property. And unfortunately, while I understand that this bill was introduced with good intentions, I'm testifying in opposition of this bill. You have a 24-page bill here. We know of 11 sponsor amendments that were discussed earlier on. There were amendments that were voted on and withdrawn during the past hearing and work group. The stakeholders that are concerned with this bill haven't had the opportunity to see a rewrite of the bill since those votes have been had. They didn't even get the opportunity to review and have a chance to understand how amendments that were discussed earlier today would impact their business. Our ask is specifically for Quick Response and for myself is that this committee in their wisdom take more time to at least allow for stakeholders to review a reprint of this bill before it's voted on so that they have an understanding of what the bill is and what they will be subjected to. I think that's only fair. And I think in the best interest of the city, just sitting here listening to the different agencies discuss and answer questions, there's questions concerning what would the fiscal impact be with respect to software and alike. I think it's very important that this committee take the time to review the bill, to review the amendments, and allow for a reasonable amount of time for feedback from stakeholders and even the agencies to provide the information so that people can make an intelligent decision on what the bill will actually do. On fiscal issues, will the cost be passed on to taxpayers like myself and your constituents, or will it be passed on to tow companies who are already suffering right now as other businesses are concerning things related to COVID-19? I think it's very important, again, that this city, this committee slowed down on moving this bill. It's an important bill. Again, we understand the intentions, but I do believe that to vote on it tonight, to move it forward without having the opportunity of stakeholders to review and understand what the bill will do is a mistake. The big concern that I have, as well as my client concerning trespass tows, is amendment number 7. It's completely unreasonable to have me, for example, that owns property here in the city, that invests in the city, pays taxes in the city, has already invested money into a security system to keep my property safe has already been threatened by neighbors and others within the city because of people parking on my parking lot, and I'm asking them to move their car, and did actually had their cars towed, had my property damaged because of that. To say to me that now I'm not going to be a lawyer anymore, I have to instead monitor my property between the hours of 8 to 7, which is during the normal business day. And if I don't monitor my property between 8 and 7 on my own, my other option is I have to go and knock on doors to figure out who's parking on my property, so that I can exhaust, as I think the amendment says, use either or, exhaust all reasonable ways, I guess, I'm not looking at it directly right now, to make sure that someone knows that I'm about to tow their car. I'm not doing that. And I've already had a tenant that had a knife pulled on them on the steps of my property. So now you want me to go and figure out who's left their car in the back of my building? That's why I paid for a trespass tower to monitor my property, to move the car when it's there without my permission. It's my property. So there's big concerns with amendment number 7. It's unreasonable. And I would ask that this committee in their wisdom oppose voting that amendment onto the bill. And again, that this committee take the time to review the bill, to review the amendments, allow stakeholders to have a right to work on it with you. I don't understand what the rush is. We have time. And I have to say that I listened to the hearing, I listened to the last work group, and I've been doing this for 27 years. I'm dating myself and giving my age, but I haven't heard one person testify in support of this bill. Not one. But this committee is looking to move a bill that people have spent the time and energy to sit on and listen to these work groups and hearings, and not one person has called in or testified in support of the bill. The closest is to offer amendments to a bill that, even with the amendments that were offered, those that offered the amendments pointed out the flaws in the bill. And I'll leave you with this. Going back to the question of the fees, well, I am a lawyer, and I do think it is important that there's an S on the word fee, and that there is a legislative history on the intent of how that fee, or how the state law should be interpreted. And Baltimore City is not unlike the surrounding counties. They too interpret this law the same way, and that is that it's $220, which would be the cost of the tow plus the administrative fee, as well as the storage fee, which the city charges day one. So I don't think there's a question there. And if you're going to move forward to moving that fee to just the cost of the tow, then I believe that trespass towers and alike should have the ability to charge day one as the city for their administrative fees as well as storage. And with that, I ask this committee in their wisdom, if you do move forward today on the vote, that it be an unfavorable vote. But if you do not, that you take the time to get this bill right. Thank you.
All right, thank you for your testimony. Next up, Buzz Greenwood. Buzz, do you have testimony?
I think a lot of the people before me, even Paula, has really hit the right mark for us. So I don't want to take up a lot of people's time, but one thing that we were, looking at, one of the big distress things was on amendment number 7, aggressive patrolling. Historically, parking has been an open problem here in the city for many, many years. management companies seeking our services complete, an impound checklist that permits towing according to their small business needs and ensures their success. During the current pandemic, most companies don't have on-site employees because everybody is not working at their office, and to call an infraction, thus magnifying the need for permitted patrolling. We had an incident the other day where there was not one but two of those big oil containers, and they couldn't get out of their own way. They were there for several hours, and that's where we come in to say, hey, we need some help. Some of the cars that were there were blocked in as well. So, our services are not always just going out to get a trespass vehicle, but being able to move so that these companies that we have, in addition to just residents, are able to come and go as they please. So that's just one thing. But I'm really, really proud of the towers today and what they've said. I usually am speaking a lot, but as I get older, it's a good idea to have some of the younger people come in and give their opinion on what we are. And our tow group is very, very tight, and I'm very proud of what was said earlier today. So taking those notes, you can see that each of us have our own heart in this thing. And we want to make sure that everybody's being cared for the right way and not something that we're losing on that end. So we have over 95 years here at Greenwood in service with the city of Baltimore. And we appreciate the long relationship, and we continue to do that for another 95 years as well. So with that, I'm just going to wrap up with that, and then we'll go from there. So thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Next up, Art Ray. Art, do you have testimony? Art, are you there?
No, I don't have it.
Okay. Next up, Jesse Keller. Jesse, do you have any testimony? Nope. Leah Lehman, do you have any testimony? Nope. Fox 45, assume you don't have testimony, but I'll ask you anyways. Do you have any testimony? Nope. Robert Carroll. You have any testimony, Robert?
Sure.
Robert, are you there? Robert?
Yes, hello?
Do you have any testimony for us?
Yes, I just want to keep it brief and agree with what the other towers had said. And definitely as far as the interpretation of the fees, since we've been in this business, it was always interpreted the same way by the same legal department and the same councilman and everybody else involved the whole time we've been involved in trespass towing. And I don't know where that got off the tracks, but that's about it. I don't want what everybody said is true. And we just like to agree with the trespass towing. The patrol hour part is we're definitely against that because of all of our clients that we do patrol for say that, they want it when they want it and they don't want to worry about it and they don't want to walk outside and deal with it or pay anybody to deal with it. And it doesn't make sense for them to have to. It's just when it's already in place and it's been working fine for all this time. And that's about it on that.
All right, thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
Call in number 20. Give any testimony? 410-299. Caller number 20. Nope. Caller number 24. 443-904. Do you have any testimony? Do you have any testimony?
No, I do not.
Okay. Caller number 28. 410-733. Do you have any testimony?
No testimony, just the thanks to the sponsor who we've had a discussion with on behalf of AAA Mid-Atlantic. We provided our concerns with the bill, so we're we're declined any testimony at this time. Thank you.
Okay. We got Tony DeFranco. And that is it. Looks like we covered everybody. If there's anybody here that did not testify and I, for some reason, missed, please put that in the comment section. If not, do any committee members have any questions, comments, concerns? Any council members? If there's no other testimony and no other questions or comments, the committee will be in recess. Thank you.